Okay. Let's see, double check, make sure we're live.
Yep.
Benjamin, hello! And happy birthday, by the way. Happy birthday from all of us who love you in America and Hollywood. Krista Lawler, hello! My enormous your partner in crime, along with Darren. Okay, well, welcome everybody to another episode of Hollywood Kitchen. This past week presented me with some challenges. First off, the guests that I had booked had to reschedule kind of last minute, so I had to scramble. And luckily for me, Annette Bohanec gracefully stepped in and agreed to do this with me, and graciously. So I'm so grateful for that. And then I was getting ready for this episode this morning, and I dropped a light bulb for my light kit, and it shattered all over the floor into a million pieces. So I am wading through the broken glass and trying to soldier on, much in the way that I think Mildred Pierce would do as well. So thank you and welcome to Hollywood Kitchen. Today's episode is going to be about actress Ann Blyth. And my friend Annette Bohanec is joining me. Hello, Annette. Thank you so much.
Hello.
Annette,
Thanks.
Annette, by the way, is a PhD, a professor at Purdue University. She also does film history lectures in person and over Zoom. She presents screenings and she runs a blog called Hometowns to Hollywood. So did I leave anything else out, or does that cover it?
That's all. Me in a nutshell, I think. Yeah.
That's a lot, and she has a really cute dog. So yes, so we are gonna make Ann Blyth's blueberry muffins. So I thought we would start by doing those at the top of the episode, and then we'll get into her life, her career, and there's certainly a lot to talk about. So Annette and I, by the way, we made this recipe last night at rehearsal, and we were both really pleased with how well it turned out, right?
Yeah, delicious. Yeah, no adjustments needed.
Yeah, which is kind of shocking because as we have long discovered, many of these recipes, there's always a lot of zhuzhing or adjustments that are needed for these. So I'm so grateful and frankly surprised when they turn out well as is. This recipe today comes to us, I think it's from the Paul Dini Celebrity Cookbook of 1952. And so for these blueberry muffins, here's the ingredients we're going to need. 1 egg, 4 tablespoons of shortening. Now, Annette, you posted a post from Pioneer Woman about using butter as an alternative to shortening.
Yeah, there's lots of alternatives. You could do like butter, coconut oil, and a whole bunch of other things. I happen to use butter just because that's what I had in the fridge. So that's what wound up going into my muffins.
I have some Crisco here, so fingers crossed this will work yet again. Let's see, 1 cup of milk right here, 2 cups of sifted all-purpose flour, 1/3 cup of sugar, 1/2 teaspoon of salt, let's see, 3 teaspoons of baking powder, and 1 cup of blueberries. I know I'm going to sound a little bit like a Seinfeld character, but it always drives me bonkers when you go get a muffin somewhere and there's like 1 blueberry in it. That makes me crazy. That is like a pet peeve with me. So I have to say, I'm doing a little bit extra on the blueberries.
Right. We want a blueberries muffin, not a blueberry.
That's right. Blueberries. And also, Annette and I were talking last night, this recipe is really good. And you could easily cut up any other kind of fruit or chocolate chips, right? Or substitute lots of other things.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right. And I have to say, in Vita fashion, this recipe, by the way, is very, very specific. And as we talked about, or as we will talk about, for those of you who are not familiar with Ann Blyth, she was a terrific actress in the 40s and 50s Hollywood. She starred opposite a galaxy of stars at the time. But her most famous and defining film role, of course, is as Joan Crawford's daughter Vita in the classic Mildred Pierce. So we're going to talk all about that after we get the muffins going. So grease muffin tins and set oven to 425. Okay. Beat egg until foamy with an egg beater. And to cut down on the racket, I'm gonna do this by hand today. So hopefully this will work. All right, let's see. All right, melt shortening and add to milk. Okay, so I've got the egg here. All right, and then combine beaten egg, add milk. So we're gonna combine the shortening, the milk, and the egg for right now. Okay. All right, sift dry ingredients together, saving 1 tablespoon to shake with berries to keep them from sinking to the bottom of the muffins. So I'm gonna set 1 tablespoon aside of our dry ingredients here. But it says, let's see, sift dry ingredients together. I have a 1930s sifter, but it's got a lot of rust inside and getting tetanus is probably not fun. So I did buy a new sifter. So I'm actually gonna kind of use this and see how it goes, see how this sucker works out. It's really nice. It looks vintage, even though it's new. It's got a little thingy here, so you turn. And I guess the idea is you flip the ingredients kind of back and forth. So I'm gonna give this thing a whirl if I can. See how it goes here with our dry ingredients. So we've got the sugar, we've got the baking powder, we've got the salt. All right, so I'm gonna come out of the sifter, a bit like magic. Okay, and I'm gonna give this a good stir as well. Okay. Now, all right, I'm gonna save aside that tablespoon of the dry mixture right here. Okay. Add liquid to dry part. All right, and it says mix using 15 strokes.
Mm-hmm.
Vita might get really mad if we do anything less than that. So I'm gonna try this. I'm gonna try it. It worked last night. Hopefully it'll work again today. So, all right. I don't want to count down. I don't know, that would probably bore everybody, but I am going to stir this. Pretty much like Vita says. 8. All right, it does blend together pretty easily, and she's right. It does not take a lot to do this. All right, so we've got our mix here. Okay, beat in lightly floured berries with 5 more strokes only.
Mm-hmm.
Only. Okay, so I'm gonna pour the dry mix on top of the berries here. Okay.
Perfect.
Gonna add the berries to the wet mixture. By the way, this is kind of what it looks like for right now. Okay. Let's see. All right, only 5. I am going to count this one down.
Yep.
1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. No more, no less.
Nope.
Okay. The batter will and should look lumpy. Well, that is good news for me. Okay. Drop the batter from a spoon into muffin tins. Fill the pans 2/3 full. Bake 20 minutes and you'll have 8 luscious muffins. When I made this last night in our rehearsal, I wound up having 10, but maybe she had different sized muffin containers than I do.
Maybe.
So I'm gonna spoon this in here, and as I do, Annette, let's go ahead and talk about Ann Blyth and get that conversation started. So Ann Blyth began her career, right, at a very, very early age.
Oh, I think we might have froze up.
Are you there? Hello?
Oh, I think the video's just catching up now.
Okay, are you there?
I'm back, yeah.
Okay, so Ann Blyth began her career at a very, very early age. You want to talk about how she got started?
Yeah, I believe she was already working as a child at around like the age of 5 or 6. She was doing like children's radio programs basically, and she was also training, doing vocal training as well. I think by the age of 9, she was already performing pretty seriously as a vocalist. She had an opera background and was already quite an established personality by the time she hit her teen years. And I believe it was around her teen years, she was cast in a play eventually that had a Broadway run. It was called Watch on the Rhine, I believe. And that play is what wound up touring. It took her out of New York and to Los Angeles, where she was quote unquote discovered and really courted by Universal Studios and signed to a contract there. But it's really her voice that put her on the map first.
And let's talk about some of her early films. At one point, she was paired with Donald O'Connor.
Yeah. And that was among the early film fare that she was getting. So when she was initially signed on with Universal, the fact of the matter is she was young. She was a teenager, and she was the perfect fit for these kind of light, fluffy teen comedies with like very predictable plots. And she played an ingenue type. So these really like kind of nice good girl roles. She showed off her voice, of course, and had several musical numbers. But the first film she did was called Chip Off the Old Block from 1944. And that had her cast alongside Donald O'Connor and Peggy Ryan, who were sort of like Universal's Mickey and Judy almost. They were doing, again, these style of teen films where, again, they had these pretty light plots, and Ann Blyth really fit the mold in terms of what they wanted to do with that. And she was cast in several of these films, and that was kind of her type initially for Universal.
And the film, of course, that put Anne forever in film history, in the pantheon, was Mildred Pierce. So let's talk about how that role came about, because to me, what always stands out to me about that film is the incredible maturity and poise she had on screen. And she was like 16 years old, which blows my mind.
Yes, yeah, she was 16 years old. And I mean, my impression with Anne is with someone who had started working so young already, like we mentioned, she was like 5 or 6 years old and already pretty seriously performing, not long after that. I think she had a wisdom sort of beyond her years, and she had a sense of responsibility for what acting and taking on a part entailed. And Mildred Pierce presented a really unique opportunity because Ann Blyth for Universal, again, she was doing these kind of fluffy, happy musicals, and Mildred Pierce is far from that in terms of that type of film and that film genre. So she was famously cast against type, which was a risk on Universal's part, but wound up being a great move for Anne in her career.
And the thing is, too, I've watched a lot of interviews with Ann Blyth. She had a really great agent that was kind of helping kind of guide her career. And the daughter role of the vicious Vita and Mildred Pierce was coveted by every actress in town. I mean, I think Bonita Granville, I've even heard Shirley Temple, like any teenage actress in that age range was probably vying for that role because it was such a good role.
Yeah, it's great. And yeah, for a teen role like that, to have a role that expresses that much range and lets you, and again, step out of type, because a lot of the actresses you mentioned were cast in terms of type and were playing ingenue roles over and over again. But yeah, luckily for Anne, she got to show off a whole different side of an on-screen persona that she hadn't been able to express.
And what's really amazing to me is that this was a make or break time for Joan Crawford, because she had been let go by MGM. She'd been labeled box office poison. She'd signed for a fraction of the price with Warner Brothers. And she knew in her bones, Mildred Pierce couldn't be just good. It had to be great. It had to be the best. This was like make or break time for Joan. Right. And she knew that. And from what I've been told, she read opposite the actresses that were auditioning for Vita. And a star of her caliber would never have done that. I mean, that was very unusual at the time.
Yeah, it's rare to hear an actress, let alone like one of the lead actresses, to be so involved in casting some people like that would appear in the film around her as supporting players. So it is so intriguing to see Joan be involved in that. And certainly Joan was a woman who had to reinvent herself several times in her career. I mean, by this point, yeah, you mentioned the challenges that she had faced, and even earlier, she had a whole separate career as an on-screen silent flapper too. So it's this interesting kind of road to revamping her image, and Joan was heavily involved in that and saw potential in Anne.
Yes, and a lot of people, I mean, we've already done 2 Hollywood Kitchens on Joan Crawford, and I'm a huge Joan Crawford fan, but so many people say negative things about her, but there's a lot of great stuff about Joan that doesn't get talked about. And there's one interview I watched that Eddie Muller did 10 years ago at the Castro in San Francisco with Ann Blyth in person. And she said Joan was wonderful. She had nothing but nice things to say about her and nice experiences with her,
Yeah, and
So,
that's so good to hear. It's just again, one woman supporting another in Hollywood. And yeah, with Joan, I think we're very quick to think about and recall some of the challenges she had later in life and what's purported to be true about her and not. But it's refreshing to hear Anne's take on things too, and hear that they had this positive relationship.
absolutely. And another thing, before I did this episode, I called my friend Alan Brody. We did a Michael Curtiz episode, and he's written this fantastic Michael Curtiz biography, which definitely I told him we would be talking about too. And Michael Curtiz was a tough cookie. That guy was not known for being a teddy bear by any means. In fact, a lot of actors were known to really dislike him. But Anne had really nice things to say about him too. In fact, she worked with him again, and she said she wished she could have worked with him multiple times because he believed in her, he supported her, and that's not a Curtiz story that tends to come up all the time.
It's definitely not. There are a lot of tales that tell quite another story in his case. But yeah, luckily she did have a positive experience working with Curtiz too. And I mean, I think that shows too. She was supported on screen and off. Her performance is phenomenal. She executes it great. I mean, Vita is every bit of a brat as we'd expect, but certainly not from Anne, someone who had this angelic image on screen already. So I'm sure her character was shocking in and of itself, just how Vita was written and the actions that she does on screen. But also to see that coming from Anne, I think it doubly shocked audiences too. But again, good for Anne. She got to show off range. She got to show that she could truly act and portray whatever character it was you wanted her to portray on screen. So it is a wonderful thing. And of course, we know that Anne wound up receiving the Oscar nomination for Vita as well.
Yes, and I've even seen a picture of her at Joan's bedside with Joan with the Oscar. And in one interview I saw, they said, "Were you disappointed you didn't win?" And she said, "No, I was just really happy for Joan."
Yeah, it's a wonderful thing. A nomination at 16 years old for a dramatic role alongside Joan Crawford is a wonderful accomplishment. So hooray for Anne, who still had a career ahead of her too. She did much more beyond Mildred Pierce, but that's a defining moment for her.
Absolutely. I don't think she ever got a role quite as iconic or juicy as Vita again. And I think for a lot of actors, sadly, that tends to be the case. Brilliant roles don't come along every day. I mean, you're lucky if you get a handful or one or two, in a career. So Mildred Pierce was definitely her defining moment. But let's talk about the film she made post Mildred Pierce, because it's kind of like, where do you go after working with Joan Crawford, holding your own against her, and then getting an Oscar nomination? How do you follow that up?
Absolutely. And where do you go? My goodness, it is a phenomenal thing what she was able to accomplish already so early on. By the time she was, again, 16, she was able to work with many Hollywood greats, and certainly not to dismiss her time with Don O'Connor and Peggy Ryan. Those are lighter films, but they were very popular too. They had a following in and of themselves. But of course, I mentioned Anne had a voice. Certainly, she was operatic. She was opera trained rather. classically trained on that front. And a lot of her films beyond Mildred Pierce focused on showing that off as she grew and matured and continued to take on more mature roles on film. We'd see her in different musical roles, some more dramatic than others, but there were films like The Student Prince, for example, and Kismet, and several others where she did get to, again, continue showing off her voice and her range as her career continued on. And that's actually how I encountered Ann Blyth and her work, was initially through her recordings, just recordings of The Student Prince and Kismet. There are some beautiful recordings. I think it was Stranger in Paradise was probably the first Ann Blyth I heard, a performance of that. And I just loved her voice, and musicals in general are my favorite genre. And I was so delighted to find a film like Mildred Pierce and then some of her teen films too, and just learn more about her actual work in person. And also there are some fantasy-esque films too, such as Mr. Peabody and the Mermaid, which is a personal favorite for me. I adore William Powell, so it's fun to see them work together on screen, sort of a pairing you wouldn't quite expect, but their story in the film is pretty fun. And Anne, of course, plays the mermaid in question, and she's just lovely on screen. The work they do to create her character and all the makeup and costuming involved to make us believe she's a mermaid is incredible. And it's a delightful little comedy as well. And memory serves me correctly, I don't think Anne has any lines in there. I think her mermaid character is mute throughout the film, but she still is such a presence on screen without words or really any dialogue helping her along. She's a terrific sort of cheeky, naughty character throughout the film that causes quite a bit of mischief, but she just had, I think, a lot of fun exploring some of the different parts that she was given during her career.
Definitely. And it sounds like Anne was one of the rare Hollywood actresses that managed to have a stable personal life off screen, which that does not happen every day. A lot of them had difficult or tumultuous situations in their personal life. Let's talk about what Anne's life was like behind the scenes.
Yeah, so by 1953, she did go on and get married to a man named James McNulty, who was a doctor. He was actually an obstetrician, and he has a fun Hollywood connection. I'm a big fan of the Jack Benny program, and specifically Dennis Day, but Dennis Day's real name was actually Owen Patrick McNulty, and Anne married his brother, James. So there are some fun photos, and I'm happy to share them too, and I'm sharing my screen in a moment here, but there are photos of Dennis at their wedding, and by all means, it seemed like they had a very happy marriage. Her husband was highly regarded as a doctor and continued on in films, but films sort of took a back seat for her because she did want to focus on her marriage and her family as well. So in a way, it's kind of nice that she achieved all this success so early on in her life, that she was able to kind of find balance in her career and in her personal life as she made progress in both, really. She did wind up having 5 children with James, so they had a large, happy family. And yeah, by all means, the stories of the children growing up and family life, playing with the other McNulty children, Dennis Day's kids, etc., are charming, and it seems like there are good memories all around.
And also, as many of us know, she was a spokesperson for Hostess Cupcakes. So there's all sorts of wonderful vintage Hostess Cupcake commercials all over the internet, which you can find on YouTube and such. And those are a lot of fun. And as you were pointing out, the comments in those are really fun.
I wasn't expecting that. Yeah, I just decided to scroll through comments on the YouTube video with Ann Blyth promoting Hostess, and there are some fun user comments there that are clearly alluding to Vita Pierce, and I highly recommend peeking into that.
And if you ever get the chance, and any of you watching anywhere, to see Mildred Pierce on a giant screen, I feel very spoiled. I've seen it on a big screen in 35 millimeter a couple of times, one of them very recently, courtesy of Eddie Muller, Alan Brody, and the Film Noir Foundation. But that film plays like gangbusters with an audience and a big screen.
It does. I think that film just has such a great way of eliciting audience reactions. It's beautifully shot. You have terrific leads in the film. Joan Crawford is phenomenal on screen. Of course, Ann Blyth definitely holds her own. And we all know the scene on the stairs that I'm sure we think of when we think of Mildred Pierce. But yeah, seeing that on the big screen, what a way to see it, and the way that movies are meant to be seen on a big screen with a community of people who are reacting alongside you. So definitely one to see in person on a movie theater screen.
And Ann Blyth has lived a long life. She's still with us. She's, I think, 93 right now.
93, yeah.
And she did appear at Turner Classic Movies Festival several years ago. There are interviews with her that are TCM related on YouTube. She's done the Film Noir Foundation stuff with Eddie Muller. So she's really lived long enough to kind of see the appreciation and the love that her movies have received.
Certainly, and it's so refreshing to see that she's been able to participate in TCM Film Festival, that she's been able to chime in and participate in these events, and has that appreciation for what she meant to people, and what she meant to people who are just fans of film, whether it's Mildred Pierce or musicals, whatever the case may be. There's an appreciation for the work that she has given us.
And that's got to be really gratifying for her to be able to feel like, wow, I made a difference and my work matters to people. And I'm sure that's got to be a very deeply satisfying feeling.
I think so. And it's one of those things that could be easily dismissed. I think some former stars just want to have nothing to do with their legacy. You see that in certainly in different television stars as well, where they do their seasons of the show and they want to be out of that type that they were playing and just totally dismiss their career. But yeah, with Ann, it's a wonderful thing that, again, she's present for her fans. I've written to her years ago, and I think she's still signing, it looks like. So if you want to reach out to Ann for an autograph, I'm sure it's still possible. So I think she's aware about how much she means, I think, to different people around the world.
Well, let me make you the co-host so we can share the screen, because you have a few Ann Blyth items to show us.
I do, yes.
Let me, sorry, I meant to do this earlier, but hang on a sec. All right, you officially co-host now, so you should be able to share your screen.
Wonderful. Yeah, so I did pull a few pictures aside that I'll share with you. I do want to say for some of these items, I own them, but I split my time between my home in Illinois and my home in Indiana. So I don't have everything with me, so photos will have to do for the time being. But yeah, let me go ahead and share my screen really quick here. Lovely. Chaotic here, but yeah, so these are the wedding photos that I mentioned earlier. So again, Ann married James McNulty. You can see Dennis Day is on the left, and one of their children is also pictured on the bottom right hand corner of the screen. This is one of 5 children again. So I just love these photos and these sort of more candid moments. But this photo, I think, is a favorite of mine too. A little bit of a story here. So later on during her career, Ann was doing appearances. She was doing the Las Vegas circuit. And while she was stopping on her tour at the Sahara, she was expected to perform there. Unfortunately, she could not because she had laryngitis. So who stepped in for her but brother-in-law Dennis Day, who flew in from Los Angeles to essentially cover for that evening. So you see here are some publicity photos from that moment. This is about a half hour before showtime at the Sahara, and Dennis Day is just checking in on his patient, as the newspaper caption for these photos read, and just spending some time with Ann before he went on to perform in her stead. So nice moment. This is the autograph that I have from Ann. This is one of 2 that I happen to have, but this features Ann in costume for Mr. Peabody and the Mermaid. I just love what they did with her in this film, and the costume is so fun, and I just adore portrayals of mermaids on film. And I did want to show a poster that I have that does advertise Mr. Peabody and the Mermaid. So this is my poster here. Sorry, a little bit of glare there, but I just love like old movie poster artwork. It is just so lovely. It's less photography and more like art, I think, with these older style posters.
They don't make them like they used to.
Oh no, yeah, gosh, they're so lovely. So I adore seeing these, whether they're reproductions or originals, whatever the case may be. Always a fun thing to have. And Carrie and I were talking, this hangs in my bathroom. My bathroom is like aquatic themed. So I have this poster, some mermaid posters, a lot of Esther Williams posters as well, but repros there so that the water does not damage them. So we're playing it safe. And I did want to share 2 costumes. I have a few costume pieces in my collection. This one is Ann's blazer from a film she did in 1952, I believe. It's called Sally and Saint Anne. So it's a pretty kind of like blue-gray blazer that she wears. This is actually one of 3. So typically with Hollywood costumes, they make more than one costumes just to accommodate any wear and tear that might happen, and that'll save them the trouble of having to repair a costume during filming. They can easily replace it. So this is the blazer she wore in that film, or one of the blazers. Here is a still that features her wearing it as well. So you can kind of see the comparison. Clearly she's wearing like a blouse with a collar under that blazer as well. But it's so wonderful. I adore like collecting costumes, props, like little pieces from a film that stars actually worked with or wore. I think for me, it's just a fun kind of crossing of 2 paths. So having the costume that Anne wore is special to me. And labels are also a lot of fun with costumes too. They can tell you so much more about the piece. So this one you can see on the inside lining of the blazer, you can see it came from Western Costume Company. And it's also tagged for Anne too. This is a film she did for Universal, and we see Ann Blyth's name on the tag as well. And usually you'll see like a number system. This one doesn't happen to have all that, but and some costumes don't, but in most cases with movie costumes, you'll also see like a number code, which will make sense to the costume department. So when they know which scene is being filmed from what moment in the movie, they have a number coding system that allows them to just pull all those costumes at once and have them ready for the shoot. So sometimes you'll also find stuff like that inside costume labels as well. That actually takes me through my Anne collection. I wish I had these items on hand, but alas, they are in my other home, sadly. Yeah, so I'm happy to at least be able to share them in this capacity with you.
Excellent. All right, well, let me go on my phone here and see if people are asking questions or making comments here. So let me see if something's popping up. Let's see. Benjamin says, Anne's the perfect mermaid. I agree with that. Absolutely.
She's so pretty. And there's some really fun, like behind the scenes photos too of them getting her in this costume. She's wearing kind of like a swimsuit piece under it. And she has like a crew of men helping her like get into the mermaid tail. And there's another fun photo I should have pulled, but I think I want to say it might be Glenn Strange who was playing Frankenstein around the same time, but there's a fun photo of the actor in full Frankenstein garb carrying Anne as a mermaid because she can't walk and like just bringing her over to set where she needs to be.
Benjamin said, I just read in 1955, an armed man who had written her fan letters was arrested near Anne's house. Spooky.
Ooh. Yikes,
yeah. I read a lot about that in old Hollywood. I read that Rita Hayworth was threatened with disfigurement. There'd be fans that would send her letters saying, demanding either money or abducting the child or marry me or else I'll kill you. Or there were a lot of things like that in old Hollywood that happened to these stars, and it is really scary. I agree. And I think back then they probably didn't have maybe the awareness of these things. So.
Yeah, and it's like, it's even different, I think, with today's day and age. There's so many more ways people can get in touch and be bizarre, but something like that happened with Shirley Temple kind of near the later years of her life. She was still doing signings. Like I was able to write in and get an autograph from her, but someone reached out to her and found her address and like I either threatened her or did something unsavory, and she stopped fan correspondence at that point on, which is lousy. Someone out there ruined it for everyone. Yeah.
Oh, that's really sad. And yeah, I mean, it had to have been really terrifying to kind of, because you are very public, you are very vulnerable. And,
Yeah.
you know, I think there's some stars that sort of use their kids for publicity, and there's others that are just very, very strict about you're not getting anywhere near them, no photos, no nothing. So it's got to be kind of hard to be in that situation for sure.
Yeah. And it seems like for Anne, she was someone who kind of protected her family and her privacy too. There's not a whole lot of publicity with like her taking her kids to events and stuff. And from what I read, when they had like social gatherings, like with the Dennis Days and other stars, like the kids would be tucked away and in bed already, or like playing with a nanny and just kind of away from that scene.
Makes sense. Samantha Ellis, the art for the poster for that film is delightful. I definitely want to own it someday. Yes, we agree. We love the art for that film too.
It's so fun. Even just the photographs too, the lobby cards and the stills from that. They did such a great job with the makeup and costuming on that. Like I just love when Hollywood takes on those kind of fantasy-esque elements like that, Creature from the Black Lagoon. Like I'm so intrigued by the artistry there.
Oh, absolutely. And there's a new book that came out fairly recently. It's in my to be read pile about the woman who created the Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Yeah, absolutely. That book is on my shelf. It's a great read. Highly recommend.
I need to read that. I have it in my pile. Samantha Ellis says, is there any special way you store the blazer, Annette? I would love to collect costume pieces, but I'm always scared of them getting damaged.
Yeah, costumes are an interesting thing because they were not meant to last. Again, clearly they were meant to be temporary, used and discarded, and Hollywood itself didn't place much value on them. But yeah, in terms of storing the costume, like luckily it's in great shape. I don't need to like restore anything on it. Thankfully, it's held its own pretty nicely. But with storing, typically what you can do to be on the safe side, try to keep it cool. So if you can store it in a room or a place that's colder than another place in your home, great. I also recommend like acid-free boxes, and you can buy these. There are like archival supply goods websites even out there.
The Container Store has them.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's another option among many. I mean, everything on the internet too. But yeah, I would do, yeah, an acid-free box. I'll usually also, just to be on the safe side, try to get it in something that's like watertight. So if you have like a plastic bin, just because I hear horror stories all the time of like some collection flooded, you know, something like an animal got to something and chewed something up. So anything that is kind of tougher and water resistant, like a plastic container, in addition to the protection of an acid-free box, is a good thing. And then just good kind of a good way to keep things safe too is to elevate. So again, if you have like flooding or like sprinklers, that kind of thing, try to keep it away from where it could potentially get wet. If you have like a higher shelf, shelve it. Yeah, there's stories too of like museums and costume pieces being ruined because pieces flooded, costumes weren't elevated, so like the hems of dresses got wet, that kind of thing. So yeah, it's costume preservation in and of itself is an art. The fact that we have certain movie costumes out there is a wonderful thing. So just props to the archivists and people who shared their collections and who collect, definitely. But yeah, I love costume collecting, and it's so fun to own a little piece of the history.
I don't own any costumes from movies, but I do collect vintage from the 20s up to the 50s. And I do have some 20s dresses that are like chiffon with beading that are very, very fragile. And you can't hang those on a hanger. I mean, I know some stores do maybe, but if they're bias cut, or even if they're not, the angle of hanging pulls those beads down, the gravity on that fabric. And I have found the Container Store has acid-free tissue paper you can wrap stuff in, acid-free boxes, and also you can get lavender sachets. I can't use muff cakes because for some reason I'm very allergic to muff cakes, but I find that if you refresh the lavender, as Annette says, store it up high, store it in colder conditions, check on it periodically, but it's a lot of work. Like I understand why these costume archives have like teams of people that maintain this stuff, because it is a lot of maintenance.
Yeah, and yeah, you see it in like vintage clothing too. There are some pieces where like they just can't be worn anymore. Like you just have to, like as someone who owns the piece, just appreciate you have it. But like if you put it on, like the sheer weight of the thing just being worn is going to ruin it. Like
that can describe a lot of my closet right now. Yeah, it's not wearable anymore. So, well, if you think about it, the 20s, that stuff's like 100 years old.
Yeah.
So a lot of fabrics, like I know silk, chiffon, they have like a 70 to 80-year shelf life. And then they just kind of start to disintegrate at that point.
Yeah, they disintegrate or they'll just naturally discolor. Some costumes too, the material they use will shrink over time. So you'll go up to some of these costumes and you'll go like, wow, that actress is really skinny. Probably not that skinny. There's some aging of the material that comes into play as well.
Definitely. Ruth Munsack, are any of Ann's children or grandchildren in the industry?
That's a good question. Yeah, I don't happen to know off the top of my head, actually. I'd have to do a little bit of research on that front. Yeah, not sure.
Me either. Oh, Danny Miller has got a news flash for us. Okay. The reason he was late is because he was at the estate sale of an 87-year-old movie collector who died last year. Their collection was insane. I filled my car with boxes, including a box for Ann Blyth. Any LA folks, DM me for the address. I will get you there if you can get there before 2:00. Ruth, there were several Cary Grant boxes I didn't buy. Ruth, if you're watching, log off right now and go buy Cary Grant stuff. And you can watch this later on because I know you're going to want to buy Cary Grant stuff.
Yeah, if anyone wants to shop in my stead, can't make it to LA before 2:00 right now.
Seriously, the estate sales out here are freaking killer. And so many weekends I'm doing cemetery tours or I'm doing Hollywood Kitchen and I don't have time to go to this stuff. And I wish I did. It's so frustrating because I hear these stories about how great these sales were. And I'm like, shoot, I got to find a way to get more of these.
Yes.
Okay, so Benjamin says, so Ann, so interesting. Ann was signed to Universal, MGM, and Warner Brothers. She must have worked and met nearly all of the golden great stars.
She certainly worked with a fair share of them, definitely.
Claudette Colbert, Burt Lancaster,
Yeah.
gosh, so William Powell.
Yeah, already William Powell. She performed with, I think, Vic Damone, and a bunch of musicals too. She really made her mark.
And Danny Miller, how did the recipe turn out? The recipe is great. Annette and I both really liked them. We thought they were tasty and delicious.
Yeah, they're wonderful. Yeah, they're nice and light, I think, which, yeah, I didn't expect. I think like today we're used to like a more like pound cakey almost texture for muffins, but these are different. They're lighter. They show off the fruit, I think, a little more than kind of the sugary sweetness.
Yes, and Danny, I was saying earlier that for me personally, I like to add a lot of extra blueberries because I'm like a Seinfeld character. I get super annoyed if there's like one blueberry in a muffin. That just puts me in a bad mood. So I kind of go a little overboard on the fruit, but that's me. That's how I roll. This is how the final product looked, at least here in my home. So these look delicious and I recommend this recipe.
Super good.
We're both pretty amazed that we didn't have to do adjustments, which again is rare for these vintage recipes.
Yeah, they were wonderful. I think my yield was 14 muffins. I went overboard with the blueberries. I just wanted to use up what I had and turned out great. Yeah, I think I had one with you yesterday on Zoom and then just one more to just double check that it was indeed delicious, and it was.
I also double checked that this morning. And if anybody lives in the Los Feliz, Glendale, or Atwater Village area and you would like a bunch of muffins, hit me up with a direct message. Let's see, Samantha Ellis, she's saying that Ann Blyth also worked with Tyrone Power, of course.
Oh,
and
yes,
she
yes.
adores her in the film I'll Never Forget You.
Very nice, very nice.
Yes, and by the way, if you guys make these muffins, tag Annette and I on social media, hashtag Hollywood Kitchen, hashtag Ann Blyth, or Celebrity Recipes or something. Because to me, one of the fun things about doing this is food and movies are something we can all kind of share together. So being able to kind of share it either in real life, on Zoom, on social media is a lot of fun. So, all right, Krista wants to see Mr. Hoagie, Annette. We gotta produce Hoagie.
Okay. He's napping somewhere around here. He's been behaving. I will get Mr. Hoagie. One moment.
All right, stay tuned, guys. Hoagie is en route. And Danny Miller, if you're watching right now, DM me that estate sale, because if I can wrap this episode up in 5 minutes, I may just jump in my car and see what I can do to get down there.
All right, Hoagie, your fans await.
Hoagie,
You know, I don't know if the muffins are hoagie safe, but he does have like little blueberry treats that he likes. So I think when my apartment smelled like blueberries when these were cooking, he was just in heaven sniffing everything.
I used to have a lab named Earl, and anytime we used the stove, Earl would stand and look through the glass in the stove as if it were the most compelling TV show he had ever seen. It was so funny.
Yeah, Hoagie's definitely my TCM buddy. He enjoyed, he enjoyed some Rudolph Valentino with me yesterday. We were watching Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse.
That's my favorite Valentino movie. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, he likes the drama.
I really wish that would get a Blu-ray release, because I know Kevin Brownlow did a gorgeous restoration, and I know the materials are out there. It just needs to happen.
I hope so too. That needs a lovely print than the one I saw on YouTube, I think.
Yes, and this year is the 100th anniversary of that film too.
Hey,
So
yes.
really
That's really
deserves that treatment. So.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, the recipe was a success. I would highly recommend these and make them again. I'd even maybe switch out the berries or try chocolate chips. It's a good solid recipe.
I agree with you. I absolutely agree. Strawberries might be good too.
Yeah.
Or raspberries or rhubarb or all sorts of things.
Get some
And
cinnamon.
Hoagie is getting a lot of love here on social media. I love it. Hoagie's getting love. Okay. And we're on a roll. Last week, Chocolate Antoinette, Krista Lawler, Darren Barnes, and I finally hit Norma Schurer pay dirt with the Chocolate Antoinette recipe, which we all liked. And today, these muffins turned out great. So I think we're on a hot streak here at Hollywood Kitchen. And that's
absolutely, yes. Oh my goodness. And yeah, I definitely have to make what you did last week. That pudding looked phenomenal, but I'll have to work through all these muffins first.
That's right. And also, do you want to plug Hoagie's Instagram?
Yeah, might as well. Yeah, he's at Hoagie Pom Pom on Instagram if you want more Hoagie in your life. He's out there.
And hopefully by tonight or tomorrow, I will have the official post up. I have this blog, HollywoodKitchenShow.com. And for every episode or entry on the blog, I post the full recipe, the final photo of how it turned out, how you can make it. You can watch the video, read about our special guest. So I definitely encourage you to check that out because it's a lot of fun. And thank you, Annette. Again, thank you for jumping in at the 11th hour and like giving us an episode this weekend and being so gracious. I really appreciate it.
I'm so happy to. It's always a pleasure to bake and discover these recipes and yeah, and just to kind of relearn about some of all these terrific stars, Ann Blyth, of course, being one of them. We're so lucky that she's still out there, that she left us this amazing body of film. And yeah, that there's so much of her work to explore across all different genres. She was a woman of many, many talents and still is.
I agree. So, Ann Blyth, we salute you.
That's right. Cheers.
Real good.
Success. Yeah, this
Yes.
This is definitely a luscious muffin. It feels like it was mixed 15 times with an additional 5. Like I think we did it correctly here.
Sorry. Danny says, thanks all. I'll share all the contents of my new Ann Blyth box soon. Ooh!
Hey.
Please do that, Danny. We will all await with bated breath.
Absolutely. Hooray.
The second I log off here, I'm going to look up the address and find out if I can speed all the way to this estate sale within the next hour. So
fantastic. Oh my
gosh. And thank you again, everybody, for joining us. Stay tuned. I've got a lot of episodes I'm quite literally cooking up for you guys in the next few weeks and even months. So join us for more food, fun, and film history. Thanks, Annette.
Hi, thank you.
Bye.